Thousands of documents leading to countless questions for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor.
I think this drip feed of revelations is drawing out the agony. I think it's also a nail in his coffin in terms of him having to speak to the authorities, both here and in the state.
In a matter of days, the former Duke of York will be forced out of Royal Lodge, the Windsor estate he has lived in for more than 2 decades. And according to people who worked behind palace doors, it is fair to say not many staff members will be shedding tears. For years now, stories have circulated quietly about what Andrew was like to work for. Not the public image, not the uniformed walkabouts, but the private behaviour, the tone, the temper, the entitlement. As he prepares to leave Royal Lodge at the King's instruction and move into a much smaller property in Norfolk, many of those old stories are resurfacing. And taken together, they paint a very uncomfortable picture of how Andrew treated the people paid to serve him. Andrew grew up as the second son, and for a long time the apparent favourite of the late Queen. He enjoyed enormous privilege, rank and access. According to multiple accounts, that status shaped how he viewed staff, not as colleagues or professionals, but as subordinates whose job was obedience.
Prince Andrew's undoing is not a subplot. It's the spine of a much larger story about power, protection, and a monarchy struggling to outrun its own blind spots.
Author Andrew Lownie, who spent years interviewing former palace employees for his book entitled The Rise and Fall of the House of York, describes Andrew as someone who believed staff were there to serve and not to question. Today we're talking about Andrew's 6 worst staff humiliations, from mole insult, cruel rants, and the creepy bed rule. One of the people Lownie spoke to was Colin Burgess, a former equerry to the Queen Mother. Burgess recalled seeing Andrew about once a month at Clarence House. What struck him was the way Andrew spoke to staff. Not politely, not collaboratively, but like an officer issuing orders. Burgess remembered Andrew barking instructions such as, "I want this done and I want it done now," or "Have that done by such and such a time." He said Andrew's repeated phrase was simply, "Do it." That was the catchphrase. 2 words, no discussion. Burgess contrasted that behaviour with how staff were treated by the Queen Mother herself, and by King Charles, who he said treated staff as human beings.
Now, an ex-royal staff member has opened up about his time working at Buckingham Palace. Dan Ottaway, who served as a chef, claims that out of all of the royals that he catered for, Prince Andrew was difficult and more demanding than others. I mean, he's certainly not getting a good rap.
The difference, in his view, was stark. Then there are the stories that go beyond tone and into behaviour that many found humiliating. According to Lownie's reporting, Andrew insisted that housemaids climb 4 flights of stairs every morning simply to open his bedroom curtains. This while he lay in bed beside them. There was no practical reason for this, it was expectation. Another former insider went further, claiming Andrew's bedroom habits as a single man were something staff dreaded dealing with. They described finding scrunched up, soiled tissues scattered around the bed each morning, which maids were expected to clean up after making the bed. It is uncomfortable to talk about, but it comes up repeatedly in staff accounts, which is why it continues to be reported. Then there's the story that has become almost infamous: the teddy bears. Former staff member Charlotte Briggs said Andrew owned 72 teddy bears, all of which had to be arranged on his bed in a very specific order. Size order. Exact placement. No deviation.
He certainly isn't. Nobody's saying a nice word about him, are they? They're working on that sort of basis. So what happened is he's shared this Dan Ottaway. He's shared his insights into the royal family life. He's now holding a position as an executive chef in a luxury hotel. And what he says is, look, everybody loved the royals. He loved serving them for many, many years. But Prince Andrew was quite difficult. And he was...
She told The Sun that as soon as she started the job, she was given detailed instructions on how to arrange the bears. She said it was drilled into her. She even claimed she was given a full day of training on how to do it properly. If one bear was out of place, Andrew would lose his temper. Briggs said it took her around half an hour each time to arrange them correctly. She described it as the most bizarre thing she had ever been paid to do. This account was backed up by former Royal Protection Officer Paul Page, who said there was a laminated handwritten guide titled DOY Bed, Points for Turn Down and Making the Bed. There was even a sketch kept nearby to ensure staff got it right. Page told ITV that Andrew would scream and shout if the bears were not positioned exactly as instructed. But it wasn't just objects that triggered Andrew's temper. There are also multiple accounts of him making deeply personal attacks on staff. Royal expert Tom Quinn reported that Andrew once had a staff member removed because he couldn't bear to look at a mole on the man's face. Another staffer was reportedly dismissed for wearing a nylon tie. In Quinn's book, Yes Ma'am, The Secret Life of Royal Servants, former employees described Andrew as bossy, imperious, and prone to behaving like what one called a classic school bully. One servant recalled that Andrew always seemed frustrated by his position in the family, not being the firstborn, not being the heir. They believed that frustration fed into how he behaved in private. The same staffer said that if Andrew liked someone, he could be loyal and supportive. But the moment something went wrong, or wasn't done exactly to his liking, he became bad-tempered and domineering. As Andrew's public life collapsed following his association with Jeffrey Epstein, his private world reportedly shrank dramatically.
He began this year as a prince and he ends it as a civilian. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has paid a heavy price for his friendship with the disgraced billionaire Jeffrey Epstein. Andrew denies any wrongdoing, but there are repeated calls now for him to tell the full story of that relationship.
According to multiple reports, Andrew and his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, lived a quiet, almost isolated life inside Royal Lodge. He is described as wandering the large property with little to do, living what one source called a kind of arrested adolescence. At 65, his days were said to revolve around sleeping late, having breakfast served by staff, then spending hours in a sitting room dominated by a giant screen that took up nearly an entire wall. There, he played video games or watched war films and golf coverage. Despite being stripped of his royal roles and public standing, several reports suggest Andrew remained in denial about his changed status. According to Rob Shooter's Shooter Scoop, inside Royal Lodge, nothing had changed. A household insider claimed staff were still required to address him as Your Royal Highness and to bow or curtsy when entering the room. The source said Andrew insisted palace rules did not apply inside his home, claiming it was his birthright and not something the king could erase. This mirrors claims in Lownie's book, where staff said they were instructed to bow whenever Andrew entered a room. If someone forgot, Andrew would allegedly say, "Let's try that again," then leave and re-enter the room so the bow could be done properly. Perhaps one of the most disturbing accounts involves a verbal attack on a long-serving household official. In his 2025 biography, Lownie recounts an incident involving David Anderson, the former head of household at Hillsborough Castle in Northern Ireland. After a severe storm in 2005, Andrew asked Anderson if there had been damage. Anderson replied that a tree planted by the Queen Mother had been affected. According to the book, Andrew fell silent, then mocked him by asking, "Did you mean Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother?" When Anderson said he had joined royal service in 1984, Andrew allegedly responded by asking how he could have worked that long and still not know how to refer to her. He then reportedly shouted an obscenity and ordered Anderson out of the room. This was a man with over 20 years of service, dismissed in seconds. Now, as Andrew prepares to leave Royal Lodge and move to a much smaller property at Marsh Farm, reports suggest he will no longer have dedicated staff. The King has reportedly offered limited support in the form of a cleaner, a groundsman, and a cook on an ad hoc basis. According to sources, that arrangement has not gone down well. For someone who spent decades surrounded by staff, ceremony, and deference, the adjustment may be sharp. So I want to know what you think. Do these accounts surprise you, or do they simply confirm what many suspected about Andrew behind closed doors? And do you think this move marks a real end to the old royal lifestyle for him, or will he continue clinging to it privately? Let me know your thoughts below, and if you want more royal family news and stories, make sure you're subscribed.